was well on its way, and talk about the service rifle that was chosen for the U.S. Army to fight the Vietnam War. Here we have the Springfield M1903 bolt-action rifle made out of Lego. So, the Springfield Model 1903 was the American bolt-action rifle designed and manufactured by the Springfield Armory back in 1903. It was soon adopted later by the U.S. Army to become the official service rifle for the nation and was used prominently during the First World War. Its role as a service rifle was eventually replaced, however, in the year 1936 by its successor, the M1 Garand, but still was used heavily by the U.S. Army for World War II, the Korean War, and even the earliest years of the Vietnam War. Now, I have made many LEGO bolt-action rifles back in the day, my most famous model being the Lee Enfield, but with this gun, I really wanted to do something different as far as the designing goes, and I wanted to make the gun feel more ergonomic and less blocky, so I attempted to make this possible by adding features like more dynamic dimensions to the gun, like for example, the stock starts off within 4 studs in width and then transitions into the receiver at 5 studs with a more narrow 4 studs on top of that, and then back down into the gun at 4 studs below and with a 3 stud wide piece on top of that. And even with the help of some roof tile pieces above and below the rifle, as well as some upside down techniques here and there, including the sling mounts and this trigger guard, they all work together to help give off a more natural feeling out of the rifle, and it is definitely one of my favorite aspects of the whole gun in general. Other parts of the gun include little miscellaneous details that you would normally never catch on this gun, such as the button that is on the back of the stock that doesn't actually detach the plate, the bayonet slide mount that is seen at the front, as well as the unfurnished wood that is exposed away from the shooter, and even at the handguard there is a handguard ring detach lever that is there just for looks because that doesn't actually work either. The next part to cover, I believe, has to be the iron sights for the rifle, which, for myself, I'm not very impressed with. The front post sight is really nice and super simple, which I really do like, but then there's the rear sight that, honestly, I'm just not happy with. The rear sights actually mimic the real-life functions of the sights super well, except for the elevation and the wind adjustments. But the sight has normal sights when flipped down, but when flipped up, reveals the range adjuster within the sights and can easily be flipped back down just to the regular sights. Honestly, to me, they just look ugly, but they do still work very well for the rifle. However, iron sights aren't the only choice of optics for this rifle, and you can instead equip yourself with this crazy long USMC sniper scope. And this scope is long. Like, really long. And this scope is actually very prominent among the Springfield rifles that were used by the Marine Corps in the beginning of World War II back in 1941. The scope goes by the name of the 8-power Unertal scope and sits at about 24 inches in length, which suited more long-range engagement compared to other Springfield scopes. And the scope on my model features some adjustment rings as well as some various small details, and was built using a bunch of these pieces as well as some tile pieces all around the entire scope. Also, the inside of the scope is very limited in space, so the reticle is just a small claw piece that sits in the middle of the scope. And unlike what most games would like to show off, this scope definitely cannot use a stripper clip, and instead would need to be loaded with individual rounds in order to reload the rifle properly. Besides that, the gun normally has scope mounts in place in order to mount the scope to the gun, but because this is only Lego, I could just easily click the scope into place and remove it as well, which makes it a very great attachment to have for a rifle such as this. When it comes to the bolt, it was something that I wanted to do similar to that of my Lee Enfield, but improve more along on the original design.